All right, our next speaker has entitled her talk, Moses, the Great Lawgiver.
Good morning. Oh, that's wonderful. All right, we've got good light up here, but it bothers me when the light comes in and it shadows the face, you know? Okay, we find ourselves being the orphans of the LDS Church. Personally, my gratitude cannot be expressed adequately for the doctrines of salvation brought to us by the prophet Joseph Smith. We are the only ones on the planet who have the Old and New Scriptures. However, we have so much more. Where much is given, much is expected. Okay, I want to go into Moses, the great lawgiver. Brought up and educated in the royal courts of Egypt, he learned leadership from the Hyksos lords for 40 years. But by the time he returns to Egypt as an 80-year-old, the Hyksos have been dispossessed. He understands who he is and that God has commissioned him to fulfill the ancient covenant given to the fathers. In leading them out of Egypt, he has suffered much ingratitude and stupidity at the hands of the horde of slaves he sought to free at immense cost. Being called up to the Mount Sinai, Moses prepares himself by a 40-day fast. Joshua accompanies him. Now, being warned of God of Israel's return to idolatry, his first reaction is to stand in the breach, 2 arms outstretched to save. With Joshua alone there to see his anguish, his prayer is a prayer of intercession for the children. Moses interceded for the children many times when the Lord was ready to consume them. The incident of pagan backsliding in the shadow of the mount was a crisis which Moses dealt with in a manner that foreshadows the very work of Christ. He was never more intimate with God or more identified with Israel. He took the sins of his people on his own shoulders and suffered for them. Up again to the crags of Sinai with another 40 days of fasting, he found his utter dependence upon God. Comes he down again with the lesser law and with a greater visible indwelling of spirit. His glowing countenance completely awed the people. He had wrought to completion the project God had laid on him, the giving of the law to a beloved people. What a burden for him. As Numbers 14 commences, Moses has sent spies into the land. Caleb and Joshua come back with a good report of the land and its fruit. The other men fear, for they have seen the giant children of Anak and walled, well-defended cities. They cause Israel to murmur, saying they want to go back to Egypt. Caleb and Joshua rend their clothes and express their faith that the Lord was able to fight battles for them and fulfill the promises made to the patriarchs of old. In verse 34, the Lord declares, they shall not enter the land of Canaan for 40 years. Hence, the real journey begins. This place was a place of anguish for Moses, a place and time when Israel frustrated his dreams, abandoned their own destiny, and turned obstinate ears to God's summons. It is a great man who can see all he has worked for and longed for, shattered in the hands of gross or foolish men, and then can turn and gather up the fragments and begin to build again. Who saw the days of hope deferred, or the years of grinding toil to bring them to obedience? Deuteronomy was Moses' last will and testament, part of the preparation enjoined upon him as the end drew near. In the evening of Moses' life, he diligently set to work anew, not only to make the succession of leadership certain, but to make apparent to the people the urgency of their call and destiny and the moral principles inherent in the birth and progress of their race. Moses understood that the rise and fall of nations depends upon moral laws. All great movements of mankind have at their core some ennobling idea. When that central faith decays, then with it the people perish. No nation is destroyed from without, which has not been first destroyed from within. Moses, like Paul, was chosen from a context where cultures collide, and who understood the task involved in grafting onto the tree a new branch with new fruit. They both had a loftier comprehension of man's reach into the future. Can we be a new branch grafted onto the original tree? There is more than one house of bondage from which God gives emancipation. The Protestant reformers helped the entire Western world come out from the bondage of Catholic tyranny, as well as political enslavement and gross ignorance. Our founding fathers read widely of these reformers. Nowhere in history has there been a more enlightened collection of brilliance than our founders. What did they read? 34% of the citations in their writings referenced the Bible, particularly Deuteronomy. Calvinist theology practiced by Presbyterians and Congregationalists left man free to self-govern, whereas Catholic and Episcopalians practiced hierarchical government by bishops or by centralized authority. Calvinist theology promotes the biblical ideas of a strong work ethic, a fear of unbridled power, protection of individual rights, including property rights, and religious liberty. These ideas were the mainstays in the creation of our divinely inspired Constitution. They gave us something worth keeping. We can say that the principles of freedom embodied in the Constitution came from the Bible and the reformers, who understood that a republic is an empire of law, not men. In closing, I want to quote John Adams. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the government of any other. Our children are learning, it is a question, are our children learning this basic truth? What do you know of the Founding Fathers? We stand at a precipice. Taken together, the social and political decay, the immorality, the decline of character and integrity, the profound ignorance, this is a great recipe for a last day's perfect storm. The enlightened education of our children is the fulcrum which will decide our nation's future. I want to end on a happier note, because this is kind of sad. What I read before was sad. There is a teacher who teaches at the Heritage High School out in Santan. His name is Joe Wolverton. He was given free license to teach his American history classes. The children have been reading the reformers and the great thinkers of the 1700s. They have been so turned on by what they have been learning that they have begged him to teach all summer long. Thank you so much. By the way, you can't probably read this, but it's a fabulous book on the Founding Fathers, Christianity and the Constitution by John Eads Moe.